So this is going to be a new type of video for me, just in the sense that it's not going to be super cool looking editing wise. I've always liked manga, but I've never really talked about it on the channel, unless it was just JoJo's. But with this series, I kind of just want to talk about manga that I've read or just have an interest in. So what that means, if you have any manga recommendations for me, put it in the comments below and I'll probably try to read it. Depends how long the series is, but yeah, just recommend me some manga. I'll read it, probably. I don't know, depends. So let's talk about today's manga, Baoh, an early creation of Hirohiko Araki, the guy who made JoJo's. This was an interesting manga because I came into it thinking, you know, it's probably not going to be very good. It's kind of bland. It's not a popular series from what I can tell because it failed. And then I came out of it saying, fuck, we were robbed. Yeah, so if you didn't catch what any of that meant before, I really like Baoh. It's actually pretty good for a short story. It's only roughly 10 chapters long with an epilogue. So yeah, genuinely, honestly speaking, it's not half bad for an 80s manga. And what I mean by that is during the 80s, Japan, in terms of the manga industry, was kind of straightforward. You usually would have a hero that saves a damsel in distress while trying to fight his main villain. And that's how the whole series would go. You know, you'd get some side characters and side villains, but genuinely and honestly speaking, 80s manga kind of all had the same concept. Not until like the late 90s would stories kind of branch off and become really damn good. And if there were manga that, you know, didn't fit that idea, they were underground and weren't known for years. Berserk, FYI. And a lot of the more interesting stories kind of laid low for a long ass time. Devilman, that's another big one that was like underground forever. But as of recently, it's become super popular. Baoh fit this idea to a T. You can clearly tell there's a main hero, he's trying to save the damsel in distress, and he's trying to defeat this organization, the main villain basically. And that was kind of the idea of the 80s. So why did it fail then, if it fit this criteria? Well, Araki's not a man to kind of fit to an idea for a long time, so he kind of, with this series, changed it from the very start and tried to make its own thing. Kind of being very similar to Devilman in a sense, our main hero. Ichiro, I think that's how you pronounce it. Remember, I'm not very good with Japanese, so this is going to be a struggle here. He's not that half bad of an MC. He's kind of generic in a sense, being the kind of pure-hearted, good guy character, pretty young. You know, very, very basic for the time period. He's okay. He's not like a crazy, super interesting MC, but, you know, he fits the time period very well. The most interesting thing about him is, though, in terms of a power system or kind of his superpower, in terms of his, you know, cool factor in this series, is that he has the ability to turn into a Baoh. And in universe, a Baoh is a parasite that infects a person or a living creature and makes them their host, but the host has kind of free will and the parasite will only activate when threatened, which makes the kind of user slash host super damn violent. And that's kind of not very shonen-like for the time, just the violent part. In terms of violence in manga and anime during the time, Kenshiro was kind of the limit, because Kenshiro, of course, would basically one-shot fools and they would kind of explode. But you could easily censor that because you can say, oh yeah, he just made them explode, so the blood could look like, you know, the ash or, you know, the smoke effect. But Baoh didn't really do that because it was clearly obvious. He melted people's flesh off and, you know, sliced them in half, showing their blood and bones. Not gonna lie, this is probably one of the reasons why it failed, but I'll save that for the end of the video. But to be totally honest, I really enjoyed that part of this series, being super violent. Almost forgot to point this out, but it's clearly obvious that Ichiro was kind of a proto Jonathan in a way, and also kind of inspired by Clint Eastwood, since Araki was a big fan of him. So you can clearly tell in the design and kind of the character he was that this was a proto-Jonathan, proto-Jotaro vampiricism mixed in with Clint Eastwood all in one character that I feel like eventually would evolve into JoJo in a sense. There are a lot of references to JoJo, FYI. In this series. So yeah, to be honest, you need to read them to find them all, but there is a lot of stuff that leads back to JoJo because of this series. So I recommend reading it, just honestly, after this video. So we'll talk about our next protagonist, and that is the female of this series, Simide. Dude, I'm not gonna be honest, bro, I can't pronounce her name. That is peak Japanese metas can't talk right there. That's That is, her name translates to Violet, and to be totally honest, this segment was going to be short anyways. She has psychic powers, which is also another power system in Baoh to see into the future. She's not heavily used unless her powers are in play. Other than that, she's just the damsel in distress, which kind of sucks because Araki for a long time wouldn't write female protagonists really good until like Lisa. So yeah, she's okay. You know, she's 9 years old during the main story and only would become important near the very end when she became 17, where the story would kind of leave off on a cliffhanger. But yeah, to be honest, she's not really important unless she's the damsel in distress, and the organization kind of wants her powers, but it's not really kind of heavily exaggerated. They want her because they want Baoh more, but you know, she's just kind of there for most of the time, but she's okay. Also, she's a really clear inspiration for Irina from part 1 Phantom Blood, who is of course the main love interest of Jonathan Joestar. So just to point that out. With the main characters out of the way and a brief explanation of their powers, let's move on to the main villains, which to be totally honest are a lot better than part 1 and part 2's villains, personally speaking. And I mean that sincerely. A lot of part 1 villains and a lot of part 2's villains just kind of seem pretty bland, unless, you know, they're the main villains, of course. But in terms of the minor villains, yeah, a lot of these guys actually beat them, which is kind of weird. Honestly, Walken, number 22, Martin the giant, was it a baboon? I'm pretty sure he was a baboon. He was just a heavily evolved baboon. And Dodoru, I think that's how you pronounce his name, were all phenomenal early villains for this series, because I would have assumed if the series had a much longer runtime, there would have been a lot more. Number 22 was probably the one that sucks the most because he was just used as fodder for Bao's first transformation into Baoh, so Ichiro's first transformation. Everybody else though, really good, phenomenal, very interesting to see and fight. A lot more interesting than some early JoJo villains, to be totally honest. I have no idea where Araki misstepped during the early parts of JoJo, but I genuinely and honestly found these characters, these minor villains, a lot more interesting. So in terms of the main villain, kind of, because Walking was more like the main villain than this guy, but the series treats him more as the main villain. Oh god, dude, I'm putting that on screen. I can't pronounce that. Kashimi. Oh, dude, no, I'm not even trying. Not even gonna try. He was overall okay. He was kind of the curator of the Baohs, but he really wasn't kind of the main focus because Walking kind of became that main focus during the final pages and chapters of this series. So with the main characters and villains out of the way, let's talk about the overarching story. The story in general, yeah, that's probably a lot better to say that. The story in general was okay. It's super generic. The evil organization tries to kill off the parents of the main character. The main character, of course, gets a power because of the evil organization. The main hero tries to kill the main organization, does it successfully, and along the way, he fights off many minor villains and the main villain and gains some cool friends along the way. Pretty damn generic, but overall entertaining for the time. Overall, I'd probably give it a weak 7. It was good and entertaining. The female protagonist and the main character could have been done a little bit better and probably a little bit more unique, even in this time period where manga was kind of generic. The villains were done fairly well. The main villain probably could have done better, unless you see Walken as the main villain, which he was way better and way more interesting, being, you know, another psychic in this series right next to Violet, insert name here. Baoh was overall pretty damn good. I liked it a lot, and I kind of figured out why a lot of hardcore JoJo fans actually like this series. It's not that half bad. But why did it flop? I kind of figured out why. In the early parts of the series, there was a lot of damn narration. And, not to also mention, there was narration where narration didn't really need to be used because Baoh didn't talk. Remember, he became this kind of feral monster when he transforms, and because of this, he would only say Baoh. So that means the narrator would have to do a lot of explaining for Baoh's kind of grunts and screams. It was a really weird narrative choice to do this, and I know why Araki did this, because he wants to be unique and kind of do something different, but to be totally honest, I think a lot of people just kind of found it dumb or really stupid. And since Araki's pretty stubborn with his writing and how he likes to do stuff, I don't think anybody really could have changed his mind when it came to this part of Baoh's character. Or my second theory, which I kind of believe a little bit more than my first when it came to why Baoh flopped, is that Japanese people didn't like this thing because of culture. You see, Baoh transforms because of an evil parasite, and parasites are mainly viewed as pretty evil around the world, but Japanese people are super superstitious, and so seeing a parasite that makes a man into a monster that only activates to violence kind of probably turned off a lot of people, which honestly sucks. But ironically enough, roughly 15 years later, a certain manga would come out with a boy with an evil powered super side, which would eventually lead to a massive flooding of the manga industry with heroes with super powered evil sides. Araki was just off the mark when it came to more mature / more villainous heroes for younger kids, because Berserk and Devilman were there, but to be totally honest, they were a little bit too mature, but I won't worry about the little details. Well, that's the end of the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. See you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.